No, but we'll shake your hand. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board Meeting of March 7th, 2022. Would everyone please rise, and together we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Keep your mic on.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our participants for this evening. Starting at my far right is Ms. Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hawker, Superintendent, and to my immediate left, Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Vice Chair, Mrs. Allie Anderton, we'll jump down there, Board Member, Mrs. Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, and Ms. Leslie Bierke, Board Member, and I'm Rebecca Smith, Board Chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the back at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting, and instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board by email at trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through the clerk. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. Tonight we will go ahead and we are going to start with some information items and celebrations. First off, we have some of our Teachers of the Month.
All right, this is kind of an exciting one for me because two of these teachers teach my kids, so it's kind of fun. Our February Teachers of the Month for high school is Laura Tolzman. She is health and first aid teacher at Lake City High School and is also involved with student council because that's where my daughter has her. And our middle school teacher of the month is Brett Berry. She is an 8th grade math teacher at Woodland Middle School. And our elementary teacher of the month is Geraldine Bryak, and she is a kindergarten teacher at Sorensen. We're super happy to have all these teachers in our district and working hard for our kids. Thank you for all your efforts.
Ms. Bryak taught my kids.
Oh.
And I was sad to see she was on the retirement list this month that we got. And I was like, no. So.
Yeah, round of applause for.
And we'd like to welcome up to the front here now Courtney Green, who is our Fernand STEM Academy winner of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science.
Just right in front. I just like to say that I value Courtney Green's contribution to Coeur d'Alene School District greatly. She's been both of my youngest two daughters' teachers the last 2 years, and we've been very honored to be a part of her family, classroom family. We're also honoring you for February Elementary Teacher of the Month as well as the Presidential Award. So Thank you very much.
Thanks. As you can tell, this is not my forte, but I wanted to take advantage of the people that stand behind this award. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge those people, the colleagues that have become my friends, the administrators that trust me with the grace to allow me to fail in my attempts to be better, my community members that give time and resources, families that share with me the honor of knowing their children, so thank you, and the students who continue to bring me joy and purpose every day. I think when big awards like this happen, we forget about all the people that stand us up before we get there, so thank you.
Congratulations to all of those teachers. Next up, we have Dr. Mike Nelson, and we're going to celebrate all of our spelling bee winners. We're really excited. And so, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you very much, Chair Smith, Superintendent Hawker, and members of the board. I am so very pleased tonight to present to you the winners of our Coeur d'Alene Public Schools District Spelling Bee. That was held on January 26th at the Coeur d'Alene Inn. Our winners in grades 4 through 8 also continued to participate in the North Idaho Spelling Bee. More coming up about that here in a moment. Tonight, we would like to honor our winners tonight with their families and ask that they come up to the dais one more time to be able to prepare and spell their championship word. Yes. No pressure. Our third grade winner comes from Dalton Elementary School, Faith Schultz. Tonight, Faith is joined by her father, Josh, mother, Beth Ann, and brother, Lucas. Faith, your championship word was frock.
Frock. F-R-O-C-K. Frock.
Well done.
Stand right up here.
And right over here to this side, Faith.
Yeah, if you want to go stand right over there.
Let's welcome our fourth grade winner, also from Dalton Elementary School, Sophia Stavish. Unfortunately, Sophia is a busy lady, and she wasn't able to make it tonight, but we will make sure that she has her plaque in recognition of her words and great work in the classroom. Our fifth grade winner comes to us from Ramsey Magnet School of Science, Riley Lechtleitner. Riley is joined tonight by his father, Cody, mother, Krista, and brother, Thatcher. All right, Riley, you ready for your championship word one more time? It was surcharge.
Surcharge. S-U-R-C-H-A-R-G-E. Surcharge.
Let's now begin recognizing our middle school winners. Our first winner from Woodland Middle School tonight at 6th grade, Oliver Van Atta. Oliver tonight is joined by mother, Brandy Hutzler. And Oliver, are you ready? Your championship word was phonics.
Phonics. P-H-O-N-I-C-S. Phonics.
Our 7th grade winner hails from Lakes Middle School, Isabella Armitage. Isabella is joined tonight by father Brett, stepmother Brooke Sostrom, grandparents Mike and Eva Armitage, and brother and sister Paloma and Connor. Your championship word was primitive.
Primitive. P-R-I-M-I-T-I-V-E. Primitive.
And finally, our 8th grade winner also hails from Lakes Middle School, Emerson Rakes. Emerson, your district championship word was avatar.
Avatar. A-V-A-T-A-R. Avatar.
So as I mentioned, all of our district winners had a chance to move on to the North Idaho Spelling Bee, except for Faith. We'll get you next year, I promise. They then had a chance at the North Idaho Spelling Bee to represent our region at the National Spelling Bee coming up over Memorial Day weekend in Washington, D.C. We're excited to share a quick clip of this very final, exciting moment.
So, this is the anticipated championship word. Your word is frugal.
Frugal. F-R-U-G-A-L. Frugal.
That is correct. Thank you. We have a champion.
That's right, everyone. Our own Emerson Rakes from Lakes Middle School has won the North Idaho Spelling Bee, and she and a family member is on her way to Washington, D.C. She'll be participating in the Scripps National Spelling Bee Memorial Day weekend. It would be remiss of us not to thank the Idaho Character Foundation with Dan and Catherine Pinkerton, who are covering all of Emerson's costs to be able to attend the National Bee. We have great partnerships here in our North Idaho community. Ladies and gentlemen, the winners of our district spelling bee. Congratulations.
Well done, everyone. Moving on to board trustee comments, we've had some busy activities as trustees, and so we'd love to hear just kind of a day on the Hill recap. And so Trustee Bierke and Trustee Anderton recently went to Day on the Hill. Could you tell the rest of us about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Is this on? So February 21st and 22nd, Dr. Hawker, Miss Anderton, and myself got to attend the ISBA Day on the Hill. It was 2 full days of lots of presentations, networking, and just gaining a ton of knowledge. We had an opportunity to learn about all the current legislation that's going to affect our educational system and how it can benefit our students in our districts. We were able to see the 3 candidates that are going to be running for the superintendent for public instruction, so they had a forum, so that was super interesting. We were able to actually attend in person both House and Senate sessions on the floor of the Capitol, which was really amazing. I highly recommend that everyone, if you ever get a chance, go down and see the Capitol and attend one of those sessions. It was very informative, great civics lesson. We also got to attend the Senate Education Committee where they discussed funding for all-day kindergarten and enrollment versus average daily attendance, all sorts of really interesting things. And then day 2, we got to see a couple of senators who did a really nice presentation on civility. So how to discuss with each other when we have differences in a very civil, productive way. And I thought that was very great and very apropos for what's going on in our times these days. And then we also attended the House Education Committee, and then we even got to have lunch with some of our local legislators, so that was really interesting to be able to ask them questions right up front. And overall, it was a really exciting, excellent experience, and I look forward to doing it again next year. Do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it pretty well. It was a great experience. I would second that anyone that has the opportunity to go and visit our Capitol and see our legislators in action is, it's definitely worth the experience, worth the time.
Thank you so much for representing us and for being able to participate in that. Terrific. Trustee Morrisroe is going to share right now a remembrance for us and for our district, and so thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Smith. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the recent passing of Brian Martin. Brian was the district's Director of Maintenance and Facilities from 1992 until 2019, retiring after the completion of the Nexus School construction project. During his time with the district, Brian oversaw construction of Lake City High School, Woodland Middle School, Skyway, Atlas, Winton, and Nexa Elementary Schools, as well as the remodel or additions to every other school building currently used in the district. Speaking with one of his colleagues recently, it was clear that Brian had a special relationship with the architects, engineers, and contractors he worked with. One opined that they could never start a meeting on time because Brian always had 20 minutes of hunting or fishing stories or maybe something crazy that happened on a previous project. Here in the boardroom, Brian was known for his no-nonsense, straightforward approach. He never shied away from tough conversations, and he wasn't afraid to share his observations and assessments with the board or the superintendent, even when it wasn't what they wanted to hear. In retirement, Brian found time to occasionally drop by my work, where he'd advocate for his people. That's how he thought of his past employees. And he'd share his thoughts. During one of his last visits, after discussing classified wages, he shared a story with me that really showed the type of person that Brian was. Brian explained that he had learned through his grandson's Little League experience that there were no longer any local batting cages and that kids were traveling to Spokane. He found this unacceptable, and so Brian went out and bought the equipment from one of the local cages that had closed, and soon he erected that cage at his home for his grandson and his teammates. Before long, he had extended invitations to all the Little League players and was allowing them to practice at his home. Please keep Val and their son in your thoughts and prayers. And there will be a celebration of Brian's life at Coeur d'Alene High School in the gymnasium on April 16th.
Thank you, Trustee Morris-Rowe. These pictures are great, and what a great celebration. So much. Thank you, and thank you to Brian for all of his work and everything he did for this district and for our kids.
Okay, I think I'm up again here. Just briefly, I wanted to just talk about a meeting I had with a constituent recently. At last month's meeting, Ann Seddon gave us all some material to look at and observe, and she asked to meet, and we were able to hook up last week and actually meet and discuss some of that information. And while we didn't agree on everything that was there, we were able to find some common ground and discuss, particularly we were talking around social emotional learning or behavior learning, whatever you want to call it. And we spoke, I don't know, an hour and a half maybe, and part of that discussion where we found some common ground, I think, is that it's difficult in this day and age with the political climate that we have. There's a little bit of guilt by association. And so if we're using a vendor and all of a sudden they take a position, that position mirrors onto our district or onto a business entity. It's happening all over the country. And we're seeing some of that with social emotional learning or Profile a Graduate, lots of work that educational institutions are doing. And because I think she and I both agree that there is a critical component to meeting the needs of students where they're at, helping them deal with emotions and character traits and those sorts of things, particularly at the elementary level. We agreed that perhaps it's time that we have something that's more locally developed as opposed to a bought curriculum. And what would that look like? And so I just want to mention that as something maybe that we discuss. I know there's been a lot of conversation in our community around social emotional learning. I think there's important components there. I think we agreed that in any of these advocacy groups, there may be pieces that are very, very good and are effective, and there may be some things that people in our community are going to object to. And so how do you balance that? And really what we came up with is if we had it more localized and we're maybe picking and choosing instead of buying full curriculums, and we're taking important parts, that might be a start. And so I just wanted to bring that up for a future discussion. That's talking with Dr. Hawker a little bit about that. There's probably some budget considerations there if we were going to develop, let's say, a K-5 social emotional learning curriculum for the Coeur d'Alene School District. There's going to need to be some resources behind that, whether that's a curricular committee or some help for Ms. Groutman to oversee something like that. So just want to get that on the radar and perhaps a future discussion. And thanks to Ann for meeting and she picked up the tab, so I appreciate that too.
Always nice. Terrific, thanks.
Oh, I didn't see you come in.
Great, thank you. We'd like to welcome our high school student body reports. We're going to hear from two schools this evening, so CHS first and then Venture. And the next two will be, our other two high schools will be represented later on in the month at our workshop.
Good evening, I'm Myra Reitz, Coeur d'Alene High School's ASB President, and also with me tonight is Ellie Morserow, our ASB Vice President.
We've had some super fun and successful recent events at Coeur d'Alene High School that we'd love to share with you. First is our winter semi-formal, which was masquerade themed and super fun and successful. We had a great turnout and we're super thankful we got to put this dance on because everyone that's currently attending CHS has never been to a winter dance. Additionally, last week our student council had the opportunity to attend the student council state conference down in Boise. And this was such an amazing experience, and we got to meet people from all over the state, get super cool ideas from other student councils, and listen to amazing keynote speakers. We really learned a lot and can't wait to implement our new ideas for the rest of this year and the next year. We received our Etiquette Award from the 2021 State Virtual Conference, which was super cool. And we also got our OSC Outstanding Student Council Award from the previous year. Also, our Booster Club and Advisor were super nice and surprised all of us by getting us state sweatshirts that we're super thankful for. Overall, it was a great experience and we all bonded and had so much fun.
We also have some exciting events coming up. Our Wish Week will be this March 14th through the 18th, and Wish Week is a week where the CHS National Honor Society and CHS Student Council come together and collaborate with the Idaho Make-A-Wish Foundation to put on an event where the CHS community works together to raise money for a local kid with a life-changing illness. This year's Wish Kid is a 5-year-old girl named Harper, and she was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 10 months. So we're going to work together to grant her wish this year of becoming a fancy Nancy ballerina. Our goal is to raise at least $2,000 for Harper throughout Wish Week. Tuesday, March 15th, we'll be having a Mod Pizza fundraiser where 10% of Mod's proceeds will go to CHS. Wednesday, March 16th will be our Buff and Tough tournament where we'll pass around buckets for people to donate money. And Friday, March 18th will be our Buff and Tough tournament and assembly, where everyone will wear their t-shirts that Friday that we've been selling throughout the week to support Harper. And last, our Viking Booster Club auction is coming up on Saturday, March 12th at 5 p.m.
We also wanted to take a few minutes to congratulate some successes here at CHS. So we wanted to do a big congrats to our wrestling team for getting second at state. We're super proud of them. And then also our March Kiwanis Student of the Month is Skylar Burke. And our March Rotary Student of the Month is Gunnar Julio. And we're super proud of both of them.
In conclusion, just as always, thank you for your continued support.
Roll Vikes.
Roll Vikes.
Thank you, CHS. And now Venture.
Valentine's Day is a holiday that celebrates the love and joy in life. This year, Mrs. Pavlik's leadership class wanted to find a way that students could share the joy and love they have for their school. During the week of February 14th, leadership accomplished this by decorating the halls and helping spread Valentine's cheer. At lunch, students were given the opportunity to share love and make free candygrams for other students and staff. At the end of the day, the leadership class handed out the candygrams, making sure to spread cheer as they went. Because of leadership's efforts, the students got to experience multiple opportunities to enact positive social behaviors through various relationships. In Mr. Failing's 5th period physical science class, students were assigned a hands-on task of finding the difference between ionic and covalent compounds. The students were told to find the solubility, melting point, conductivity, and particle shapes under a microscope of the compounds. This was done so students could learn the bulk properties of compounds based on their molecular makeup. Students were also able to ask questions, research, think for themselves, and also present the information they gathered and their findings. As Venture strives to embrace the portrait of a graduate, this project guided the students through creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. One of Venture High School's senior advisors, Mr. Levy, wanted to give the seniors a fun day to relax and build relationships. On February 16th, he and a few other advisors took the senior class on a field trip to Frontier Ice Arena as a one-time wellness period. He wanted students to be aware of an affordable and healthy form of entertainment that could raise their spirits. Students got to enjoy time together as a group and enact positive behaviors.
Great, thank you, Venture. Now we'll hear from our student advisory group. I believe Ainsley and Austin, and you'll have to introduce, I can't see the sign. Who is our third? Jonah. Hi, Jonah. Welcome. All right.
Is it on? Oh.
Okay, well, to start, this is our friend here, Jonah, from the elementary school. But I would just like to start off with thanking you guys once again, and thank you, Superintendent Hawker, and everybody for giving us the moment to share what we have been working on. We are going to first start with our elementary friend, Jonah, here, so I will pass the mic to you.
Good evening, Chair Smith, members of the board, and Dr. Hawker. My name is Jonah King. I am a second grader at Nexa Elementary. I am here on behalf of the Student Advisory Group, also known as SAG, to let you know what we talked about at our last meeting that took place on March 3rd. We have many friends that aren't able to eat gluten. We would like to help them by having some more gluten-free options at lunchtime. We are excited about the opportunity to speak to Mr. Ducar about this at one of our meetings. We also talked about safety at school and kindness. One of our ideas for kindness was to have a random acts of kindness day once a month at each school and create kindness pictures that show and tell about kindness. Maybe we can talk to our art teachers about helping us create kindness posters. Another thing we discussed at our meeting was our concern for safety at school. We came up with some ideas that might help, like having more cameras at our schools that are in different areas. We are excited about the opportunity to speak to Mr. Dean Keck. Mrs. Morrison was also at our meeting, and we enjoyed talking to her. We discussed our ideas and how we can reach out to different people in our district that would be interested in talking at our monthly SAG meetings. We will let you know how that goes at the next school board meeting. Mrs. Anderton was also there at our meeting, and that was really nice. We also wanted to let you know that we meet each month in this building for our SAG meeting, and we really enjoy sitting in our chairs and using the microphones. We hope that's okay, and that everything was left clean. Thank you so much for listening.
Jonah, just real quick, do you know what a mic drop is? You just did a mic drop. You just killed these. You took the thunder out of the high school kids. Nice job.
You really did. You really did. You really did kill it. Next up, we have our friend Madeline here on Zoom with us from the middle school.
Good evening, Dr. Hawker, Chair Smith, and trustees. I'm Violet.
And I'm Maddie.
Thank you so much for having us today. We are so happy to have Ms. Anderson join us today at our meeting. Today we reviewed school board policies regarding the dress code and cell phone policies. These concerns stem from our middle school survey where we asked all students what their biggest concerns were.
We broke up into 3 teams to discuss dress code, cell phone, and study time. We spent time today looking specifically at policy 3255, student dress, and determined which lines or sections we could potentially revise. We are hopeful to present our revision ideas to Dr. Hawker at our next meeting for the board to consider in the future.
We also spent time discussing policy 3265, personal electronic devices. We went through the same process of lines for revision that we would love for Dr. Hawker to see in April.
Lastly, we discussed study time in all 3 middle schools. Many students mentioned that school workload balance with activities outside of school is difficult. We spent time discussing options that might be built into the different bell schedules at Canfield, Lakes, and Woodland. We plan to invite principals and assistant principals to our next meeting to hear our ideas for troubleshooting this issue.
We are proud of our progress on these policies and are hopeful that our revision ideas will be taken into consideration.
The entire middle school SAG is beyond thankful for this opportunity to share ideas among our student body. Thank you for having us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie. And now we would like to share what the high school has been up to. This week, we have had the honor to share our meeting with Mr. Dean Keck, our Director of Maintenance at the district office, Libby Barrett, our Assistant Superintendent, Assistant Principal from Lake City High School, Brandy Johnson, Campus Security Officer from Coeur d'Alene High School, Edwin Couch, and Board Member Allie Anderton. Collaborating with all the parties involved, we are going to give a trial run of the Costco method that we have previously talked about in the last meeting. which is students will show their ID cards at lunch when re-entering the schools if they leave for lunch. This will be taking place at Coeur d'Alene High School and Lake City High School. And we are planning to run in April after spring break with Mr. Dean Keck and the high school SAG representatives. Austin Smith, our vice chair here, would love to share with you the details of this Costco method and the progress of it moving forward. And so this is really exciting to see some of our concerns be addressed, and thank you again to all of our guests that joined us. Second of all, one of our concerns that we have mentioned previously was a preferred name call list for subs when taking attendance. And we have been in contact with the district office, and Skyward has been working on creating a preferred name list already with their program. So we are waiting for an update to see if that would be a good fit for our school district there. The third concerns that we were focused on was teachers focusing on teaching electives that they're interested in. And for the time being, we have kind of tabled that idea and are really trying to put all of our focus into implementing that Costco method and safety at school lunches. Thank you so much again for your support, and thank you to the district office for helping us address these concerns. It has been a wonderful month.
I don't know if there's any questions from the board. I would just like to say that's a wide variety of topics that you have been addressing and really going after, all of which just really just improve and make our schools better on so many different levels. And so thanks for all your work, for your advisors' work. Yeah, and Austin, you're even sporting a new student advisory shirt, I see, which is really, really cool design. So I don't know if there's any questions from the board, but no? Hearing none, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. I really appreciate it. So, thanks. Good. Next up, we'd like to hear from our Coeur d'Alene Education Association.
Good evening. Thanks for your time, Chair Smith and trustees and the district administration. I'll be pretty brief. This month we didn't have a huge amount of new business or progress on anything I haven't explained in quite detail in the past. It's a bit of a calm before the storm, as I said in my report, that over the next few weeks, there's going to be a whole lot of work on the insurance, the budgetary things that we'll all be really looking closely at when the state over the next few weeks decides on the fine print of the funding allocations and the actual money that we're going to be looking at for next year. Then things are going to get a lot busier for the CEA and the negotiations team. The only thing I'll point out is I would really like to encourage us as we go into the negotiations process to really, whether it's the funding or the insurance or the language about the dual credit stipends or the before school duties, I'm a little concerned that we've gotten in the habit over the last couple years of seeing these crises and these really unpredictable times reflected in the documents that we're trying to negotiate for. And I think that this year, especially looking into setting the precedent for next year's budget down the road when we start thinking about the local levy rates, that this spring's negotiations are really going to be important to set some things down that are more permanent and not temporary fixes or stipends or things like that, but look at interest rate or inflation rate adjustments, policies that are more decisive for respecting teachers' time and the work they do. So I'm optimistic, lot of good things at the state, as you've know better than I do, but hopefully this is not just a small bubble of optimism, and we can sort of set some expectations for what we see going down the road. So that's all I have this evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. All right, we're going to move into our public comment portion of the evening. And I want to remind the public that while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it's not a meeting with the public. It's a meeting of the board to discuss district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during this public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. At the designated time, you'll be called to the podium. Please state your first and last name and address or city of residence. If you have additional comments that you would like to be presented to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, who will ensure that the board members receive this additional commentary. If you have handouts for the board, give them to the clerk, who will disseminate on your behalf. Please keep in mind that the board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Thank you. We would like to hear this evening first from Russ Mccain. I'd welcome him up to the podium.
Hi, you guys. I'll try and outshine Jonah there, but I doubt it. This is terrific. I saw this for the first time last board meeting, and these kids up here bringing an insight. It's important, and they do a good job. But I'm coming to address your Venture High School, which was last board meeting as well. I helped develop the Point Market on Northwest and Lakeside and watched all the hiring process. And they pulled some good kids, one of which is named Megan. And after listening to the cooking, because I thought it was a new program, and I thought they heard there's a need, and let's get these kids off to some good jobs. That's project style or venture style. And so I called everybody, told them about it, and I told this young woman, Megan, who is an incredible young woman. She's 20. Still in my eyes, she's a kid, but her business savvy, her everything about her is like a natural ability. So I told her about this program, Adventure. If she needed to find staff, that might be a good place to go get it. And she looked up at me and she says, "Where do you think I learned it?" And so it's an older program, and this young woman is very successful. She's got a bright future. And I think that, sometimes the good things that happen around get missed. And I just wanted to wish them all well and the program well, okay?
Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Howard Coons.
Good evening. I'm Howard Coons from Coeur d'Alene. I'd like to speak in a roundabout way about two of the things in your strategic plan for the future, diversity and equity. What is truth? You might say, well, you've got your truth and I've got mine. But I'm quoting from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That means they believed that they were absolute, to be unquestioned. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 56 men who signed that document believed in a Creator, the one who has revealed himself in the words of the Bible and in the person of Jesus Christ. The Bible says God created one male and one female, and we have all descended from them. Therefore, there is only one race, the human race. Diversity of character, of personhood, is what counts, not diversity of appearance or heritage. They said that all men are created equal, not in intelligence or capabilities or physical attributes, but in value. The Bible says that when someone was murdered, regardless of the victim's wealth, rank, or age, whether they were young or old or yet unborn, the murderer's life was to be taken in return. Each human life is a gift from God and has value because we are made in His image. The founders did not declare the reality of the times, but the ideal to be reached. And during the Civil War, hundreds of thousands of white men gave their lives to end slavery. This has to do with equity. Our founders declared that God gave men the liberty to pursue happiness, but if anyone was to obtain that happiness, it was through his own individual effort. Now, human rights activists proclaim that every person has a right to food, clothing, housing, medical care, rest, and leisure, among other things. God will not provide these things. The Bible says if anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. Socialism promises these things, but only delivers poverty. The government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you have. Equity is strongly promoted through your strategic plan for the future. Equity is a buzzword for socialism. Perhaps you didn't know that when you moved forward with this portrait of a graduate, but I hope you do now, and I hope you abandon it. We are in the midst of a second American Revolution. The first one was founded on the truth of Scripture. This one is based on ideals that deny and oppose those truths. The battle is now, and you must decide whether you want to preserve the constitutional republic to which you just pledged allegiance, or whether you want to destroy it and replace it with socialism. Your choice will make a difference. In closing, I'd like to read Idaho Statutes Section 33, 1604. It is entitled Bible Reading in Public Schools.
And
Selections from the
you're at 3
Bibles to be
minutes.
chosen from a list prepared from time to time by the State Board of Education shall be read daily to each occupied classroom in each school district. I'd like to see you obey that law.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Jeremy Deshane?
Good evening. Jeremy Deshane, Coeur d'Alene. Came to speak on equity and SEL. Despite continued public scrutiny, the administration continues to move forward with Equity Framework and Social Emotional Learning, SEL, which promotes division and bias in our young adults. As many of us in the workplace have experienced, there's a massive push in both public and private sectors in America to establish an initiative labeled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DE&I. And the Equity Framework is no different. You'll find these same three themes declared on pages 7, 8, and 9 in the Equity Framework document. It is a Trojan horse that opens the door to radical ideology, such as laying the foundation for racist tropes such as white privilege or pronoun theatrics. So when Superintendent Hawker tries to simplify equity in his October newsletter as merely an opportunity to expand kindergarten to all day or allow school transfers, he's either dangerously naive or willingly misleading the public. Either reason should be of great concern to parents. In regards to SEL, Superintendent Hawker's newsletter uses peer pressure, making good choices, and conflict resolution as some of the examples of how SEL is implemented. This completely ignores the concern of the overarching theme that runs throughout the equity and SEL's continuous references, which is an obsession with race, gender, and cultural identity. All 5 core competencies that are listed under SEL in the framework emphasize the need to focus on cultural identities, discrimination and prejudice, power dynamics, cultural demands, race, and privilege. These are the exact words pulled from the text on pages 22 and 23. These factors are not related to genuine coping skills, but merely a way to conform young minds to perceiving that they are constant victims based solely on a person's physical attributes. To get an understanding of how well SEL is not working for our children as practical application, look no further than last month's school board meeting. It was actually just reiterated. Last month, you had the student body representatives bring forward examples of how the school could improve safety measures to allow them to feel safer in their environment. Here's a few examples that were actually just shared, actually. Students are requesting a surveillance state by way of cameras in their environment to protect them from peer pressure and perceived outside threats. Identification checks to eat lunch for risk of nearby school students showing up to eat with friends. And to have their legal name not read aloud for roll call so that they feel quote unquote safe. Those requests are beyond comprehension, not due to the fault of the children bringing these concerns forward, but that we, the school and the parents, have placed our children into such debilitating state of social functionality. Parents and the school board, I ask that you make yourself heard for the sake of our children's future. The responsibilities fall to us not just to protect our children, but to ensure that they have tools necessary to cope with reality and to express critical thought. Not bow down to the prejudicial groupthink and authoritative dependency. These divisive teachings and equity framework and SEL components should not be what we expect to see in a portrait of a graduate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeShane. Ann Seddon?
Is the button on? Yes, good. First, I want to start by saying how much Brian Martin will be missed. I got to know Brian during a brief tenure on school board myself when we managed to pass a large bond that accounted for much of the remodeling of schools. And we'd come off a rough time of getting bonds passed, but I think Brian's steady hand, upfront, no nonsense, we're going to spend the money the way we say we're going to spend the money, was extremely valuable, and I just wanted to do a ditto on what a good man he was. Okay. Casey and I had a good meeting, and it's just a delight to be able to discuss things in a civil way and try to find common ground. And we did find some. Number one, we both care about kids, and we really know that the social and emotional aspect of children is very important. I think we also were able to home in on how the structure of things in these programs are not local. This, that they're, and I don't want to speak for Casey, but we talked about local control, and Casey is in favor of local control, and that's how you bring unity to a community. The research that I had done, which he really looked at, in my mind, shows how we don't have local control. You all have copies of this, and anybody who wants a copy, please come get it from me. But you can see it really is a top-down program, particularly when we need to have our textbooks aligned with social emotional learning and CASEL. And SEL now is no longer SEL. They have now taken on the title and combined with transitional SEL. So I think since these organizations are becoming more and more open about what they're doing as far as social justice and racial divides, I think it's time for the community and the board and the staff to think about pulling away from these groups, formulating your own plans with your marvelous teachers that really care about the kids.
And Ann, we're about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because they do. And I think we can do this in this district without the political wrangling that goes on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
I'd like to welcome Randy, and if Randy, if you could share your last name with us when you come up, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Randy Neal. I sent the school board a email detailing some how critical race theory is still in our schools. I do want to share an analogy before I dive into that. In my grandpa's generation, he was an 18-year-old storming the beaches of Normandy. In today's society, we have 18-year-olds that, when confronted with the slightest adverse situation, they need a safe space. How do you get from that to that? In my generation, we were taught to compete, and we were taught sportsmanship and how to be good losers. One of the main things that I saw that changed is we started handing out participation trophies and essentially bubble wrapping our children so they don't learn emotional grit. Another thing that I noticed that changed was, like many of the prior speakers, was social emotional learning. And these things are not reflective of the traditions that I was taught in my own family and what I consider to be vastly important. When my daughter attended Lakes Middle School, in her first year there, she was assigned a video through a program called Brain Pop. It was under social studies for BLM, and it's riddled with critical race theory. It teaches our students about institutionalized racism, and you can argue that, well, the material's available but no teachers teaching it. Then why is there a lesson plan available for this material? Just having the link says links for students. That there presents it as material that is being provided by the school to teach these kids critical race theory, which is against the law. I can't even impress upon, get this thing out of here. You know, I have a multiracial son. I do not want him to be taught that he's automatically a victim. He has a mostly Caucasian younger sister. I don't want her. She came home from school crying because one of the teachers at the middle school told her that she was a racist just because of the color of her skin. Dr. Martin Luther King said famously that I dream of a world where people are judged on the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Critical race theory was intended to be college-level theory to identify things for a highly educated individual that's already has a mature brain, not for children. I work in a field where
Mr. Neal, we're at 3 minutes, okay?
I'll finish up. I work in a field where, as a program manager, case manager, I oversee 600 young adults coming right out of high school, 18, 19, and 20. They have to be re-socialized. They have to be taught how to work. And they often throw big tissy fits and quit because they can't handle the adversity of coming into work. The portrait of a graduate that this school is achieving in practice,
and we're way over, so if you could wrap it up, please.
Is a portrait of a broken person. That's what the school's achieving, and it needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. McCollum?
Good evening, everybody, front and back. Thank you for slipping me in at the last second. Hadn't planned on talking, but I wanted to recognize Casey's thought tonight, and it appears that you guys are all in favor of the idea of getting a more local, community-focused plan in place for the school, for the district. And I'll just leave that as it is. But having said that, I was recently brought aware of a Zello program within the school. I think that's Zello with an X. There's some material that's being brought to light in the middle schools that address bias in career paths. Number one, some of the resources and collaborators for Zello are Ed Week, Southern Poverty Law Center, NPR, New York Times, ASCA, Edutopia, and the NEA. I find it very ironic that these are the groups that are pushing for the education of our children for bias in careers, as I find all of these on this list to be very politically biased themselves. So I just ask you all to take a look at Zello, especially at the lower grades. I don't think it really has a place in the district. I'm sure they have a lot of good programs for the high school age kids. But again, if you'd all take a look at Zello, I'd appreciate that. One last thing, I'd like to give a shout out to Katie Grotman. Thank her for her time recently. I sat down with her. She and the group down at the district office were kind enough to supply me with copies of the pre-calculus textbooks, both past and present, so I could take a look at them, because I've been hearing a lot about some of the things that are in the curriculum, in the textbooks lately. We all have. And I thought, you know, why not go right to the top, go to pre-calculus and see what it looks like? Because I know what it looked like in the 60s. I know what it looked like in the 80s from dealing with my two boys. And I thought, well, let's check it out.
And we're at 3 minutes.
It was very interesting to find that the last pre-calc textbook that everybody had in the district was straightforward math. Period. End of discussion. Have a nice day. It was what I remember it from the 60s and the 80s. Then I got to take a look at the current textbook, and the interesting thing was that going through it page by page, I found that by taking notes, I came up with one full page of notes where it specifically called out company names by name. Which,
and Mr. McCollum, I'm going to need you to wrap it up.
Wrapping it up, about 15 seconds, okay? So a full page of company names, and that's social engineering in higher math. You're teaching the kids to be good consumers. I think there's enough on their plate with television, video, et cetera, on their phones and all around them, not to have that in the textbooks in pre-calculus. And again, the collaborators and the resources for that book within those company names, if it were me, I'd wonder, am I going to get a kickback as a district for all this pushing forward of your company names? So okay. Again, thank you, Casey, and the trustees for thinking about a local look on the district. And thank you again, Katie, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCollum. That is all of our public comment this evening. Do we need a quick break before we move on? Or how are we doing? Everyone's good tonight? Okay, just checking. Want to make sure. All right. Good. I want to move on to consent agenda for this evening. I'd like to pull out E for further discussion. So Is there a motion to approve then A through D and F this evening?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on any of those items? All in favor then?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to pull out then just really quick for maybe further discussion, just the approval of the district calendar for 2022 and 23. And wondering if we could ask a couple questions. There was a couple things that were just really different about next year's calendar that I wanted to maybe address and ask some further questions about. And so, so Dr. Hawker, should we just address those questions to you right now, or? Yeah. So I guess the question for me is, can you tell us how the calendar is kind of, how it comes to be, and maybe some of the players in that really quick? The concern and the question that I have especially is for next year's Christmas break, because it's just really different than what we have been doing. And so I want to pull some attention just to that right now. And so could you give us a little background?
You bet. I'll be happy to begin to address that, and then certainly can invite Mr. Eric Davis, who leads that calendar committee, to get into any additional details if I leave anything out, Eric. So we'll tandem this here. But so it's my understanding that this calendar that's being presented to you today was initially put together a couple of years ago, and it was right at the change of your HR directors. I guess that would have been a full year ago, and it was put together during that change, and it ended up never getting presented to the board at that time. But that was the recommendation of that committee at that time. So, being new, with your HR director being new, who leads this committee, with your superintendent being new, all of your assistant superintendents being new, we wanted to revisit this conversation to see what this calendar really was about, because it is different than calendars of the past. So the committee is made up of 18 individuals. It's a cross section of classified, certified, administrative employees in the district, and they have met multiple times to review and put this calendar together. And because of the uniqueness of Christmas holiday falling on a Sunday this next year, and even a Monday the following year, the conversations were apparently it's tradition in the district to have a 2-week Christmas break every Christmas break. My previous experience had been there's always a couple years where you don't quite get 2 full weeks, but in this district it's been tradition to have a full 2-week Christmas break. And so there was lots of conversations. Do you have a week off before Christmas and then come back right after the new year, or do you align more with potentially some of the college schedules where they don't start till middle of January-ish, and maybe have that break extend on a little longer into January? So the committee shared with me that it's not a super majority or 100% support of the calendar, but it is a majority support to have the Christmas break extend for the next 2 cycles. And this is the first. This year is the one being presented today. We do plan to bring the following year's calendar at the April meeting, but it's the recommendation to have that Christmas break be a week longer into January than it ever been in the past. The neighboring school districts are also having those same conversations. Post Falls has been, their calendar committee really is non-existent, and so they just want to do whatever the other 2 districts do. But it is my full understanding that the Lakeland School District plans to present a calendar extremely similar to this, especially with the week after New Year's. They plan to present that at their board meeting in 2 days on Wednesday. So, Mr. Davis, did I leave anything out?
No, it basically comes down to it's a problem that we have 2 times every 7 years when Christmas falls on the weekend. And it also came down to, if we take that week in December before Christmas off this year, we're going to end up with over 2 weeks, because January 2nd is the holiday observance that we are required to maintain, which is a day of instruction that we'd have to figure out someplace else in the calendar. So there were a lot of issues that came into us deciding that might be the better way to go for these 2 years. And then it starts to circulate back to where we can get back to being traditional. So that should give you kind of a preview of what might be coming in April too. So
That's helpful.
Yeah, I think for me, this is something I made a note on just because it is, I don't think it's a change in practice. I think we've always gone to school through the Friday before the Christmas holiday. It just so happens this year, Christmas Eve's on a Saturday. So kids are going to school till December 23rd or through the 3rd. And then it's starting back up, I believe, until the 9th. So
Correct.
a different look than we've had maybe since 7 years ago, and I just don't remember it. But
Yeah.
I think I understand that reasoning. I think it would be a little awkward the other way. And I'm not sure how a midweek, like, do you go through Wednesday and you start on the Thursday, or,
It'd
be strange there, I
It's
think.
choppy,
Right.
to do it that way. This way, it's kind of clean. It does. I mean, let's be frank. It does present problems in terms of going to school up until the day before Christmas Eve. However, the benefit outweighed the difficulty as we really took a look at it. And just to answer your question, there's a committee of 18. It is balanced all across the board: teachers, office administrators, principals, and district office people, and we're trying to attack it from all angles.
Any other questions? I guess I would just encourage, as we push this out, especially, there's a number of folks that have to plan, and put in for time off and that kind of thing. So maybe as we push out this calendar, really just alerting folks so they're not caught off guard, especially, I think of healthcare workers that are often months in advance. And so we're kind of entering that window. So maybe just to let parents know so they're not caught off guard.
And I think the other critical factor, too, is that we are in alignment with the other 3 districts because of JDC and because of some other situations, and we all seem to be on board on this concept.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. Good. Well, then, do I have a motion to approve E for this evening, or?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda item E.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Thank you. We have our consent agenda items for information then out here this evening. Is there any questions or any items on that consent agenda that any trustees wanting a discussion about, or are we okay with those this evening?
Could we just put Ms. Town on the spot real quick and just ask her briefly to touch on item E, the trustee zone equalization?
Great, Ms. Town. It's come back a few times. First time that we've actually seen it physically, I think, in our packet, so.
What questions can I answer for you?
Could you, I don't have any questions per se, but could you just explain briefly why it's back in front of us when this was something we approved a few months ago? Just kind of a brief how that happened.
Yes, the board approved. We had 2 options to redraw our trustee zone maps, and the board approved option 2. That was in October. We submitted that to the consulting firm that was working with the School Boards Association to send that off to the state board. The state board met in January and approved everything, and it wasn't until we received back the final map from the state board that we noticed just a couple of minor changes. So I reached out to the School Board Association and inquired, why is this looks a little different than what we had submitted? They then explained, and we didn't know it at the time, that there's this requirement that you cannot split census blocks. Honestly, I didn't even know what a census block was. I've since learned it's a very small geographic unit used by the U.S. Census Bureau. And within the process of redrawing our zones, we cannot split a census block. And in our Zone 2 option, we had done that inadvertently, not knowing. Very minor, but it did change the look of our new Zone 2 map. So It's already been approved by the state. We've got the legal descriptions ready to roll. We just felt it was important that the board could see these minor changes to the final version of the map. We'll make sure and get that posted on our website and get those legal descriptions redrafted and in our board procedures.
Terrific. Any further questions or anything on that? Okay, great.
One of those little, oops, how did that happen? It's all good.
Good. All right, thanks. Hopefully we can put that then to rest finally. We're done. All right. Good. What's that?
It's done for 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, we have to do it in
So-
10 years.
Let's see. Yeah. Lynn. All right. We're going to move on then to our legislative update and budget update. Dr. Hawker, would you like to introduce this? I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. We'll turn the time over to our CFO, Shannon Johnston, who had a great opportunity to go down to an IASBO conference the last week or two, and learn lots of great things to be able to share with us a little bit tonight as we enter into our several next months of budget conversations. Shannon?
All right. Good evening, Chair Smith and trustees. So yeah, just what Dr. Hawker was saying, a little bit of a legislative and budget update tonight. I had to put a disclaimer because bills are changing by the minute. I was fortunate to go to a finance conference pretty much held by the State Department of Education. Julie Oberle, CFO of Public Finance, was there for 2 days, and literally by the hour she was getting text messages and reporting those saying, oh, never mind, this bill is dead, or these changes. So really we'll just we need to keep a watch. It's the start of the game, so just a big little disclaimer. And then what I'm presenting tonight, they're estimates. There's going to be changes, but I just wanted to start that informational piece so we can really see when we're hearing these big ticket items like health insurance, how that's going to affect the district. And then also a disclaimer, there's going to be some calculations in here, especially for our foundation payment I'm going to cover. We're really going to take a deep dive when it comes to our budget subcommittees. I'm 2 months in. The funding formula is complicated, so don't worry. We will take a much deeper dive in how the calculation works at our budget subcommittee. So don't worry if it doesn't all make sense right now. All right, so for our agenda tonight, I'm going to go over the February 15th foundation payment, big deal in public school finance. A little review of what we kind of have planned for our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds so our COVID funding. And then we'll take a look at some of our big ticket items that are coming up in the legislative process. Okay, so for our current budget, in January, Katie was up here and she gave the amazing news that our support units, what we're funded on, were going to be based off of enrollment, fortunately, this year. ADA she was projecting 470. Looking at enrollment now, it would have been about 480, but a huge hit to ADA, and that would have been a huge hit for our funding. So great news there. And then we got our February 15th foundation payment, and that consists of pretty much what we are going to see for our state revenues. Our state allocation is about 70% of our general fund revenue, and this February 15th foundation payment pretty much shows our final salary-based and benefit apportionment revenues, which is 70% of that 70%. All right, and then just a nice pie chart just to show you kind of what is in that state apportionment. It's 70% of our salary-based and benefit apportionment. And then we have our 25% is based off of a discretionary. So a discretionary per unit support unit amount, which was a little more than $29,000 this year. And then what makes up of some other discretionary state support and transportation. All right, and bear with me with the nice financial diagram. We were projecting at our original adopted budget 500 support units. So that will be in your first column. Now, the February 15th payment, and after that, great news about enrollment-based funding, we are projecting midterm support units of 412.28. And when they say midterm, it's enrollment from the start of the school year to, I believe, the first Friday in November. So they're taking that average daily attendance or that average enrollment for this current year. So we're definitely up based off of adopted. And so what we would see in our budget is an additional $1.2 million. So great news for our budget. I do want to put a little disclaimer. There's a big talk about PSEF freeze. So PSEF stands for the Public Education Stabilization Fund. And what it's been intended in the past is that the state is adopting the next year's budget. State Department of Education has to give that to legislation in the fall of the previous year. So really when the state is creating their apportionment, it's based off of estimates of the state support units, of entire state career ladder, salary and benefits. So they're estimates. Now, when it comes in after the fiscal year ends and they under appropriated, meaning that there are more expenses or they didn't anticipate as many support units as there were, well, there's a funding gap. And the Public Education Stabilization Fund has kicked in to cover that funding gap. So the districts would be made whole with their discretionary funding. And legislation for fiscal year 22 decided to freeze that help, that withdrawal. So they will not be withdrawing from the PSEF account. And if we are under appropriated, well, that just decreases our discretionary funding. So a little complicated to explain. We'll take but hopefully it kind of makes sense. Now, if the PSEF freeze, with the PSEF freeze, based off of a 5-year average of those PSEF withdrawals, so the amount of withdrawals that were taken out to cover the remaining discretionary funding, we would project that as a state, there'd be 23 million in withdrawals on a 5-year average, and our district is about 3.1% of that state, so about 713,000 could potentially be left out of our discretionary funding. So you'll see on that fourth column where we would have a total of 1.2 million additional, well, it would go down to about only 500,000 additional if the PSEF freeze kicks in. So we'll keep you updated on what that will look like. And Julie Oberle seemed a little more optimistic that it might not be that much, so stay tuned.
Can I just ask a question? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yeah.
So state appropriations, I'm just going to pick numbers and kind of use round numbers. So let's say it's $1 billion. And expenses come in at $1.023 billion, because that's, I think what you said is the average. They've missed by 23 million on average over the last couple of years. So to fund that $23 million in expenditures that districts have expensed, or they've incurred those expenses, because this is all done at the end of the year, of course. They're drawing from that fund to fund that $23 million because the state appropriation is $1 billion, and that's it. It's not adjustable. It's locked in at $1 billion.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the question here is, or what they did is they said for this year, we're not going to be able to access PSEF.
Yep.
Right. And is that because of ESSER, and the availability of those funds, or?
It has to do with that. Yeah, they're still going to be doing a deposit to PSEF, and as you've heard, state revenues are up. So I think the intentions were during COVID times. It was everything is looking a little more optimistic, but they're keeping that freeze. So unfortunate for us this year.
So this year, assuming the appropriation's $1 billion, we go as a state, we're at $1.023 billion. The districts are equally sharing, based on their chunk of the revenue, those $23 $23 million in losses, which
Yep.
our share would be $700,000.
Yep, and then you will see it directly taken out of that first row in entitlement, and we'll know that final amount July 15th. So, okay, and then just some reminders for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. At budget adoption, we were projecting a little more than a $4 million deficit. So what you'll see in that the red highlight box, I just wanted to put a reminder out there because we're going to refer back to that at the end of the presentation. So 4.3 million of ESSER 2 and combination of 3 was put into or allocated to the general fund to avoid disruption in services. So pretty much to balance the budget so we wouldn't see that deficit. In year 2, we are projecting a $3.35 million contribution to offset the deficit, and then in year 3, about $1 million. So just keep that in mind when we go to the end of the presentation. All right, so the big headliners now for our legislative updates. State health insurance, we've all heard a lot about that with the upcoming weeks, and even, this Monday there was a huge JFAC did budget setting, so a lot of information coming out there. What you see, I'll explain the first one. We are in the 21-22 plan year. So what you see is ISBT, that's our insurance. It's the Idaho Schools Benefit Trust. So it's a self-insured fund. Multiple districts are a part of it. But we have Blue Cross. We have currently about 1,063 covered employees. Average cost on the employer side of insurance is $10,551. So current benefit cost for the employer is $11.2 million. Now we are going to compare the proposed state health insurance plan. The state health insurance plan is in existence already. The state employers at the state have this plan. So now they're offering it to schools to participate in. We are looking at our current enrolled employees, and then you also see a waiver. Well, based off of just actuarial health insurance liability, the state insurance plan requires the participants to also pay for eligible employees who have declined coverage. So very significant from what we currently do is that if they decline coverage, they get a little opt-out piece, and then we don't pay for them. So very different at the state level. So if we looked at our current cost to the state plan cost is $13.6 million. We are looking at, we'd have paid $2.4 million more for the current year. Looking at renewals for next year, just assuming a 10% increase on health insurance, just as conservative as possible, we would be looking at $12.3 million for next year. And then the state plan is going to $14.6 million, and that $12,500 that is guaranteed what they are going to be the employer cost. So significant increases, and even if our assumed increase was shorter, like a 2.3%, I believe was last year's, that would be even more of an additional cost comparing the state plan versus our current plan. All right, and then just as a state level, they have, as a state, have increased their full-time contribution to $850. So you'll see it goes up to $12,500. And then part-time. So that's where you see the numbers jumping from $11,650 to $12,500 per the cost of the employee. To fund this, the state is going to be increasing our health insurance discretionary by a little more than $6,000. Huge numbers, so it's $6,000 per support unit. What we are currently funded on $13,316 per support unit, so it jumped to $19,698. Just using our current support units, that's more than a $3 million increase in our health discretionary that we can use to cover our current employer costs. Great news is that that would pretty much cover, depending on the our increases to our plan next year, it would cover 91 to 97% of our general fund and employer cost. So a huge win for the district for that additional discretionary. There's been a lot of talk, I'm sure you heard it on Day of the Hill, if it would just be discretionary or would we be actually required to prove that we're spending it on employer costs. And because it's covering 91 to 97% of our general fund, no matter what they actually rule, we wouldn't have to send any money back. We could prove 100% is going to health insurance. All right, along with just what the additional costs would be as part of the year-to-year, there's a one-time buy-in for to be a participant of the state insurance. The state is giving districts $4,500 per support unit to help with this buy-in, and just looking at what the costs would be on an average, it costs the district 3.4. So if we got 2.3 in additional one-time funding, so it's still an additional cost to buy into the district, about a little more than $1 million. Okay, so that's it for health insurance. I know it's a lot. Additional budget items. Oh,
Can I ask you a couple questions on that?
Of course.
And I know, of course, we have an insurance subcommittee that's going to talk about this. I'm sure negotiations, obviously, this will be something heavily discussed.
Yep.
We're not required to move to the state plan, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we'll get
And
the
we'll
discretionary
start-
regardless.
We'll start comparing benefits and those sorts of things.
Yes.
As well, okay.
Okay. All right, some other just big items for legislative updates. They're going to do another holiday, meaning they're going to not charge school districts the per se sick leave. That's a 1.16% rate for the employer. So another savings of about $650,000. So great to help out with the deficit for next year. Not so great news is the talk of the elimination of leadership premiums. We are getting $640,000 currently for leadership premiums, so that would have to be a cost that would impact the general fund depending on what we decide for leadership premiums. And then just this morning, it sounds like there's going to be a 7% increase to admin and classified salaries for salary-based apportionment. So we'll continue to analyze how that impacts our SBA salary-based apportionment during our budget subcommittees. And there is going to be some one-time funding from the American Rescue Plan for career ladder. It's not going to be added onto the base. It sounds like just additional funding, probably in the form of stipends. And there also is a current year one. Just they released some more information. It looks like it's going to be $1,000 for instructional and pupil, but just still waiting on those final numbers from the state. And then another big ticket item surrounding the funding for full day K is our literacy increase. So instead of actually putting in a bill that the state is going to fund full day K, the governor has decided to increase literacy instead by a whopping 178.5%. So it's going to $46 million. Now, and for our district, that probably means about at least a $1.4 million increase in literacy funding. This morning, they were talking about how they would have to update code and what literacy allowable funds are for, and say that it's also for full day K. But even if they didn't say that, we could identify allowable uses for our literacy and use that savings to fund full day K as well. So different options, just waiting to hear more and what they do on their part to update the current literacy law. All right, and then I apologize for so many columns. I just kind of wanted to give a big picture of if we took our current year budget and we added these changes, where would we be bottom line? We're just starting fiscal year 23 budget, so these are very, very rough estimates, but it's just trying to paint a picture for the impacts for the district. Your first column, you see your fiscal year 22 adopted, so what you're used to seeing on your monthly financial reports. In that federal revenue section, that's the ESSER 2 and 3 contribution to help continue operating costs and pretty much to help reduce the deficit. So you'll see that outlined in column 2. So really we would have been at a $4.3 million deficit. We used ESSER to kind of make us whole. Now fiscal year 22 revised, you'll just see the foundation payment update as well as the IBB negotiation settlement and that $750,000 increase to classified salaries. And with the legislative changes, under your state revenue, that 3.2, that's the additional health discretionary. Under salaries and benefits, under the expenditures, that 640, that's your leadership premiums because there's no funding for that anymore. And then you see that transfer, that 1.4, well, that's a transfer, that's the additional literacy funds, and we would essentially transfer out expenditures and put them in the literacy fund instead. And now taking a look at your revenues less expenditures before ESSER 2 and 3, now we would be sitting at a $1.3 million deficit, big improvement from that 4.3. And then that ESSER 2 and 3 balancing operations line item that we saw earlier, well, that would put us into a surplus. So not as much would be needed to balance the budget and could be diverted for other allowable ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 uses. All right, and then last one, just big talk about will we continue to be funded based off of enrollment? And it's a big maybe. The bill died to make it kind of official permanent, but they're introducing a new bill just to at least extend it for fiscal year 23 and 24. So depending on if we are funded by ADA just in this year, that would be an additional $3 million loss. So we are crossing our fingers on that one. Be happy to answer any questions. Thanks for sitting through that with me.
Great, thanks so much. That's a lot of moving pieces. And Shannon, maybe from your experience, how much, we still have got a couple weeks left in this legislative session.
Yeah, there are a lot of gaps.
Just from what you know, and even from what Dr. Hawker knows, and even from last year and sitting on this, there's a lot of changes in these numbers between now and our next reports, right? I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I felt like I had to start with a disclaimer, just because these are such hot ticket items and we keep hearing about it. It's so important to just keep you informed. So that's why we did this.
Along the way.
I just have a comment, and maybe this is just for all of us, but since we have 3 new board members, I thought it was important. The legislators and the governor are super generous in the way they frame things, and so they say, well, we've given a 7% increase in salaries for administrators, let's say. And that never comes to the table to us that way, and that's because we have a large local levy here, and we're using a significant portion of that funding to pay our teachers above the career ladder. So they're saying 7% at the career ladder, and we are, I think, on average, around 9,000 or 10,000 over the career ladder. So 7% at the career ladder, it's still a significant increase, but it'll be something quite less than that, if that was just passed through. So. And it never includes benefits, if I remember.
Yeah, and thank you for that disclaimer. And we'll take a deep dive on the average salary that we're funded on and what our actual salaries are during our budget subcommittees.
Great.
I just want to clarify and make sure I'm understanding correctly. So when you talked fiscal year 22 projecting forward to fiscal year 23, so that's essentially saying with the legislative changes that you highlighted in this presentation, everything else being similar to this year, we would be at a 1.3 deficit.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty much taking this year's budget with the legislative changes just because we're still developing our 23 budget, so we don't have that information yet.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions or? All right.
thank
Thanks, Shannon.
you.
Thank you so much. Terrific. I'd like to invite Dr. Nelson up then to share with us our assessment and student achievement data.
Are you sure you're ready to take a look at more numbers?
Bring them on.
All right.
Great.
Good evening again, Chair Smith, Superintendent Hawker, and members of the board. It is my honor to be in front of you tonight talking to you about the end of the first semester. Ended in January. What did it look like? How did our report cards turn out? And then also to give you an overview of what we are doing to prepare our students in classes today for graduation and what our graduates in the past have been doing. It's an opportunity for us to be able to take a look at the now and the future. Let's dive right into our first semester grades, where we'll be focusing on the Portrait of a Graduate component of content knowledge. Well, at the end of every term, we provide a grade, but there's a lot within a grade. Certainly the grade is coursework, it's assessments, it's participation, it's a variety of things. And at the very end of that, a calculated grade appears on a high school transcript or a middle school report card. What did it look like? Well, I've broken this slide down into two different panels for you. The left-hand side is our middle school distribution of grades. In our middle schools, we do not provide pluses and minuses, so it is a solid A, B, C, D, F. In our high schools, we do provide that leverage, and a lot of that has to do with the determination of who will represent our schools as valedictorian, salutatorian. It gives us an opportunity to striate that a little bit. I've provided a scale down here at the very bottom where the darkest green is good, those are A's and B's, and then the yellow C's, and then the more you get into the oranges and reds, you can get an idea on what that looks like. Let's take a look at our middle school distribution. In our middle schools, about 70% of all grades earned in our middle schools in first semester were D's or F's. In high school, that number was a little bit less, but still a great majority of our students are receiving very good marks for their work at our middle schools and high schools. However, it's not just as easy to be able to take a look at the green, it's a little tougher to take a look at the orange and the red. And that would indicate, well, those are the students who are not performing to expectations. So you can see up on the chart that we have about 12 to 15% of students in our middle schools or high schools who were unable to get a credit potentially for that. Now again, that's D's and F's together. Our D students do receive a credit for their work. But
Dr. Nelson?
Go ahead.
This is a chart showing individual classes, not students.
This is overall semester grades.
So
if I
of
were a
all
middle
of our
school
classes, you know, each student took however many 6 classes.
Mhm.
This is each student times 6. 45% of those were A's in our high schools.
You could look at it that way, yes. So if you
Okay.
take a look at all students in our middle schools,
I guess I'm just trying to clarify, is it we're not talking about students here, we're talking about courses.
well, the courses and the students are ultimately the same because the grade is assigned to a course and a student. But
Okay.
let me make it as easy as possible.
Each student gets multiple grades. Am I?
So-
I guess I'm trying to get at, is this like, did 7% of our high school kids get at least one F, or were 7% of the grades given an F?
The latter.
Okay.
7% of all grades given were an F.
Okay, thank you.
So ultimately, yes, we need to take a look as a system of why did we have some students fail? Certainly there's a lot of reasons behind that. And one of the things that might be helpful for us is certainly we're living in unique times. We may also want to think about, is this normal? We sometimes don't always perform as well as we would like to. It's actually fairly normal for us. As a system, before the pandemic, we were at 12.6% DNF. So this is a little higher than that. But in last semester 2020, or excuse me, semester 1 2020, right in the midst of our pandemic, so it would be the first full semester after the pandemic began, we were at about 20% D or F. So certainly better, but there's always some stories behind it. So I wanted to break this graph down for you a little bit more, and I think, Trustee Tenbrink, this will help you out a little bit more as we kind of move through along the way. I wanted to break it down to numbers now. So when you look at that middle school graph, of all of those, we're talking about 291 total Ds and Fs. This sunburst graph that you see represents our students in 6th grade, that's the green section, 7th grade, that's the blue, and our 8th grade students, that's a whole lot of yellow. So overall, when we take a look up and down, and it's a little hard with the lights in here, we try to find, well, where are those Ds and Fs coming from? So on the outer ridge, let me get my mouse over here, let me actually move this into a laser pointer. On the outer edge of our sunburst, I have taken out all of the subject areas. So if we look at the largest percentage of Ds and Fs that we saw in our middle schools, the largest chunk right here comes from 8th grade science, then English language arts, electives, math, social studies, and students who are taking IDLA coursework. When we were reviewing this as our team, we saw that there was a higher than normal tendency in our middle schools. If a student received one D or F, they unfortunately got a whole lot of Ds and Fs, which may mean that we need to work more with the individual student, not just the coursework. We need to find out what's going on in that student and be able to support them through their learning. There was also a higher tendency in our middle schools to fail math and science than there were in other coursework areas. And of course, a much higher tendency, much more than I would say would be a normal distribution in 8th grade versus our 6th and 7th grade students. Trustee Tenbrink, may I break protocol for a moment? Did that make sense to you along the way? Okay. In addition, I've also provided the same data for you in high school. How many Ds and Fs are we talking about in the high school that were represented? A total of 469 Ds and Fs. Now, you're dealing with a larger population, so it is equitable when you kind of roll those numbers forward along the way. Here, you can start in this light orange for 9th grade, and let's go around the horn to 10th grade, to 11th grade. So each of those are about 13%, or excuse me, about 23% of the overall portion, so about 77% overall. And then finally, this piece is our seniors up in the corner. When we were evaluating this, it was actually somewhat surprising that there was a higher probability in our high schools to actually fail world languages in this particular semester. And that we also saw that most of the Ds and Fs were generated by grades 9 and 10. Certainly, as students are moving into high school and matriculating through the system, those would be the students who have endured the last couple of years. So again, it talks to us about the need to understand our students and find out what's going on. Specifically, we also reached out to both our principals at Coeur d'Alene High School and Lake City High School, and there are a variety of different things that they're doing to be able to support them, including homework assistance tables, peer tutoring, a Viking Power Hour with some intervention time, opportunities for a potential summer school remediation. And the other thing that it exposed was the challenges that we had with substitute teachers. In that, especially in world languages, we had staff members who were out. And when you're talking about continuity in learning a language, that's challenging. So there's a lot of things in there, but I can tell you that there's a story behind every one of these data, and we are obligated to make sure we understand it and react to it. Somebody's going to say something.
We're going to have a raise. I have a question.
Ready.
So this is a yearly. Do we have any data for maybe consecutive years to see perhaps the students who are struggling and getting the D's and F's, if they're the ones we're seeing continuing through the years? That might be helpful to know that and maybe give us better insight as to why that is. Do we have that data?
Absolutely, Trustee
Okay.
Yerke, and we do work with our building administrators. They are very cognizant of these students. And
sure they
certainly
are.
when our students are moving through the system, they are running a chance of not being able to fulfill the goal of graduation. So they are constantly trying to work with students and find that spark that works with them. Or take a look at different levels of coursework or different approaches to their learning along the way. But absolutely, there are names behind each of these. Trustee Morserow, did you have something additional?
I did. So my question, I think what stood out to me on this one was electives, because I think of electives as student choice, right? And that they're picking coursework that they're interested in. And I guess I didn't piece in that world language has fallen into there. So I wonder, especially at the freshman age, is it a matter, and I know we struggle with electives, particularly at Coeur d'Alene High School, and placing students in those courses of their choice. Sometimes we're placing them where we have seats available. So some of that, we're not getting kids in classes that they're interested in from an elective standpoint, I guess is what I wondered. And I know you don't have that answer. But I think maybe that's something to think about. Because I know it seems like particularly this year we had such a big freshman class. It seems like in my 6 or 7 years doing this, it was the most I'd heard rumblings about I couldn't get in the class that I wanted to or in the elective I wanted to. So I just wonder if I know for me in high school, and some of you know my story, but if I wasn't interested in something, I did very poorly in it. And unfortunately, that was most of my classes.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Morserow, and certainly we have to recognize that if a student, especially in world languages, if we want to use that as an example, if they're unsuccessful in semester one, it makes no sense for them to continue on with a year-long course. So that actually puts additional burden on any elective offerings that you have within the school as well, and you are certainly well-versed, as well as most of our community, as to the challenges of electives and balancing the needs with the bell schedule that we have. Should we move on to what we're doing afterward? So as our students are going through, it's important to make connection with them and truly understand their need. Every one of our students comes with a different mix, a different cocktail that we have to work with along the way. So this is where we're going to focus again on content knowledge and our portrait of graduate, but we're also going to talk about collaboration because there are a great deal of things that our staff and students and community resources do to be able to help make sure our students are on track for graduation. And that the work that we are doing is focused on a career path. Speaking of that, we've already heard a little bit about Zello tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about what we are using with Zello and how that's relative to this work. First of all, Zello is a service. It is a contracted service that we use that puts our students at the center of their journey. Every one of our students has a dashboard, and this is an example dashboard along the way. All of this data is visible to parents and guardians, staff members, and students themselves, so that ultimately we can understand learning styles, goals, objectives, career fields that they would be interested in, because it's so powerful. If you know that a student is interested in motorcycles and you're doing nonfiction reading, that you can now provide a great article from Popular Mechanics about motorcycles. It entracts them into the reading. It gauges their work along the way. So led by our college and career advisors, Danny Gray, Carrie Hines, and Lauren Georges, they actually work with students starting as early as middle school on a variety of different activities that gets to know them a little bit better. Here are the activities that we have selected along the way. And if you don't mind, I'd like to point out to Mr. McCollum, these are the selected tools. We do not use everything within Zello. So these are the selected activities that we have. And that particular one that was shown early with concern is not on the list. But we do offer decision-making, learning paths, and we start the development of a 4-year plan in 8th grade. You'll also notice as you move to the right of that 4-year plan that you have recycle areas. because those are the times also where we make sure that our parents and guardians understand each student's four-year plan, that they give opportunities for input on that four-year plan, and that four-year plan actually feeds into course selection for the coming year. So if you look at my daughter, for example, who is a ninth grader, she's heavily interested in the medical fields. She has gone into Zello and she said, yeah, I'm interested in being a pediatrician, a nurse practitioner, throw it all out there. And now Zello is saying, well, you probably want to take as much math and science available to you so that you can get closer to that goal of getting into a medical career field. And it makes those suggestions along the way. Additional activities that you see are things about work values. We heard that highlighted a little bit this evening. Careers of demand, choosing a college or university that fits those interests that you have, and specifically having a great job interview and finding that work-life balance. All of these activities, again, are visible within our Zello platform, and parents and guardians can see any student's responses at any time. So using Zello and starting that career field, we also wanted to say what happens once our kids graduate. At this particular point, we also partner with the Idaho State Board of Education. And the Idaho State Board of Education provides each school district in Idaho access to National Student Clearinghouse. National Student Clearinghouse allows us to track our graduates to 99% of colleges and universities throughout the United States. We get to see what they're studying, what they're interested in, how long is it taking them to graduate, because that ultimately helps make sure that what we are providing is in line with what their future goals and aspirations are. National Student Clearinghouse is in full compliance with all federal law and all of our district's work as well. So I want to back up a little bit and take us all the way back to the good old years of 2013. Think about that, almost 10 years ago, they're talking about these graduates along the way. What percentage of our students went to college or university, trackable by National Student Clearinghouse, right after graduation? I actually graduated early from Coeur d'Alene High School, so I took a gap year, so I wouldn't even be represented in this back in my day. But what percentage of kids actually graduated and then the next fall went to a college or university? Those are represented up on the screen. You'll see that we had a high at one point of about 66% of our graduates going directly to a college or university 6 years ago, and currently at 52%. Now, although we're on a little bit of a decline right now, I am still pleased to tell you that Coeur d'Alene Public Schools has the highest go-on rate in the state of Idaho when compared to the 10 large districts. Mostly, Idaho's average is not great in this area. 37% throughout our entire state of students go immediately to a college or university. And you can probably understand, Idaho Ed News started looking at some of these data statewide, which are also declining, and they said, well, what's causing you not to go to college and university? And you can imagine some of the responses. Money, uncertainty, the pandemic, and I need to be at home more to be able to help out. So the game is changing a little bit more, but we're still doing fairly well above both the averages in our nation and in our state. But then what happens if we take a broader look and say, well, what happens 2 years after a student graduates? Well, those numbers do increase to a high level of 70% back in that same 2015 school year. And again, our graduates in the class of 2020, remember it's 2 years, so we'd have to go back a little bit, definitely exceed, again, the national average and the state average of 41 and 47% respectively. This also would take into consideration any student who takes a gap year like myself or chooses to serve a church mission or some other calling that they may have. It's also important to notice that this date was accurate as of early September this year. We have not yet received enrollment data for second semester. Most colleges and universities just started that, so we do expect these numbers to rise. When they do get to a college or university, where are they choosing to go? Are they choosing a private or a public university? Well, our graduates overwhelmingly choose public universities compared to private universities. And that distribution has not changed much over the past several years.
Dr. Nelson, do we get any data that would give an indication on trade schools and those sorts of things?
Yes, in fact, we'll go into that here in just a few. Most trade schools are considered post-secondary institutions, so you will actually see that when we take a look at a graduate. We'll be able to look at certificates earned versus degrees earned, and I'll try to point that out here for you in just a moment. I bet you can guess which college or university we send most of our students to. It just happens to be down the street. It's North Idaho College. In fact, 22% of their current enrollment is a Coeur d'Alene School District graduate. And as there are changes in the demographics and needs of North Idaho College, certainly that's come into consideration over the last couple of days. But overall, 1,190 of our graduates since 2013 have attended and/or received degrees from North Idaho College. University of Idaho is next. Boise State follows all the way down to Whitworth University near Spokane, having 27 of our most recent graduates. Of unique note, a private university has climbed up quite a deal, 40% increase for Grand Canyon University in Phoenix over the past 10 years. Once our students get to college, are they staying in college? You may know that unfortunately Idaho recently has had the worst retention rate in the entire country of getting kids to college and having them persist all the way through to earning a degree. I am pleased to tell you that our persistence rate is extremely high. Coeur d'Alene School District graduates do very well. 82% of our graduates continue on and ultimately achieve a degree. National average was 76% in 2019. Idaho, again, at 62% currently. This does include any associate's degrees, bachelor's, master's, and beyond.
Dr. Nelson?
Yes.
That's 82% of those who choose to go.
That is correct.
Okay.
Must be present to win. Finally, what are they getting degrees in? We know that our students are doing well, but are what we seeing and preparing them for in our classes now what they are actually doing with their careers once they earn their degrees? Let's take a look. This is a little bit more of a challenging thing to see, but, and your graph is coming, Trustee Morrisroe. At least I thought it was. Maybe I didn't include it in. Actually, I do have it. It's coming. This shows, if you take a look at our graduates from the class of 2013, how many of them immediately went into classes and how many of them persisted all the way through. So if you take a look at that particular graduating class, they were brand new to college right here, and you can see that they persisted and ultimately earned degrees. This yellow bar identifies that they are no longer enrolled, so we do see an increasing gap, but that also means that more and more of our kids are getting degrees, therefore they're not as enrolled as much. It's a good sign overall for us as a district. And many of our students are graduating on time. Some colleges and universities offer 2-year programs. Some of them offer 4-year programs. Some of them even offer 6-year programs, including master's and doctoral degrees embedded. Our students are doing well and graduating on time. What are they getting? Well, they're actually getting degrees in a wide variety of options. When we take a look at all of our graduates from 2013, we actually have attained 487 different degrees with these students. All kinds of degree fields along the way, but the most popular is general studies. Not unusual because of the fact that we send a majority of our students to community college, including North Idaho College. That is a general ed degree that allows them to move on to a 4-year university typically. Following that, psychology, a coursework that we offer, a psychology 1 and 2 elective, but not much after that. Business administration, elementary education, always good to see that in there. Nursing, liberal arts, graphic design, finance, engineering, biology, business, communication accounting, microbiology, and marketing. Overall, you do see the certificate areas over there off to the right-hand side. Trustee Morrisroe, 92 certificates so far have been earned, and I'd be more than glad to give you a listing of those certificates should you have that interest. Overall, as they say, the kids are doing all right. But at the same time, we talked a little bit about what we're seeing in the classroom now. We certainly have areas that we can grow to be able to better meet their needs. I'm glad to be able to stand for any questions that you have.
Oh, yeah. Austin, please. Could you try your microphone, Austin? Thank you.
Okay, we'll do it this way. The question was, do you have any indication of the numbers of what students continue on to enroll in the armed services, perhaps, maybe, right straight out of high school?
Thank you very much for your message, Austin. And I don't immediately. Sometimes those data are a little bit harder to find because our United States Armed Forces aren't as willing to share that. But we did do some research a couple of years ago about the percentage of students who do choose to serve in the armed forces. Can I follow up and try to get the most recent data for you? Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Austin. Other questions right now? I know there's some that we've asked in our packet as well. Great. Really interesting to see this. Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for your work on this. And it would be interesting to see what those actual certificates are. So when you have an opportunity to maybe bring that back to us or send that to us in a memo.
I will follow it up with a memo for you.
Interesting.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. We need to appoint a board liaison and alternate liaison to the finance subcommittee. And Dr. Hucker, really quickly, could you maybe, and maybe Trustee Morrisroe as well, tell us a little bit about the finance subcommittee and what that is.
I want to hear you.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
No, I really think Casey would be the best one to answer this question. It's a subcommittee that's going to meet about 3 times between now and your board adopted budget, so that we can vet all this information. Right, Casey?
That is correct. It was something new we started a couple of years ago as a subcommittee. We meet 3 times, or they meet 3 times. And I should know it's revenue is one of the topics, expenditures, and the setting on units, basically, right?
Yeah, the first one's going to be more about like fund balance
Okay.
and process, and then second one revenues,
So-
then expenditures.
All right. So it's been a nice process. So it's a mixture of admin. There's been 1 or 2 board members on it, and there's CEA folks on there, and classified as well, maybe. Maybe not.
Maybe.
No.
No, because we don't.
okay.
We don't negotiate.
But it's a good process. It used to be when we went into negotiations, we spent the first, I don't know, it seemed like 10 sessions, but it's not that many. First several sessions just going over revenue numbers and kind of debating units and those sorts of things. And as you can see from our discussion tonight, units is super important to how much money we have as a district in our budget. And so it's important that we're not overly conservative or not overly optimistic on those, because if you budget 10 more units than you end up funded on, that's a big hit you're going to take in your budget. So to me, that's been one of the biggest benefits of that subcommittee work, is that they have that discussion and then they come with a recommendation. That subcommittee actually votes and recommends that to the board. The board decides whether we accept that or not, that recommendation as the basis for our budget. So it's a great place to learn about those things and to talk about expenditures and maybe what we're looking at going forward and those sorts of things. So it's a good process. And to do it in only 3 sessions, it's not too painful. I think they're an hour or 2 each. I think 2 hours, I think. And we do, I believe, revenues, is at the very end, because we're always waiting for the state to come up with the revenue formulas and all those sorts of things, Because once legislation's done, then they have to put those into spreadsheets that then they give to Shannon and all that, so.
The last couple of years, it has been helpful that the trustees that serve on negotiations committee attend those meetings as well. So, but I am curious. I mean, I realize for myself, even having sat on that the last 2 years, I did learn a lot, at the same time. So I wonder how some of that could be communicated back. I know we'll have our own meetings at other times, but that is the one thing that, because there's just a lot of good information. So keep that in mind. So,
Yeah, it's one of
Trustee
those, I think
Anderson.
I've done it every year since we've done it, but I've also done negotiations. I could probably go either way on it. I think I'm up to speed enough that I can figure it out just looking at the slides enough to know what we're talking about. If other people are interested in it, if there's not, then I'd be willing to do it, because to do negotiations, you have to have a pretty good understanding of those numbers. I mean, we'll all have to know some of it, but it does help with negotiations.
Is that something that we can sit in on without being a part of? I wouldn't be an active liaison, but
At those budget committee.
would it be something
the
we'd be able to
subcommittee
sit
meetings.
in?
There could be 2 total, right?
Right.
And I think it's in there for a primary and a alternate, right?
So what I'm hearing you saying though, Trustee Morris, or is that you're comfortable not necessarily serving on that for learning, or what what's your sense going into this year with so many changes and different things?
Well, I could go either way. I'm probably the only person in the district who's done it every year.
Mm-hmm.
Of who's still standing,
Right.
if you will.
I know.
So
this
maybe
could be
for
a good time
continuity,
for
but
history that
I think
to be
also maybe it's time for someone different too. I don't know. I'm happy to do it because I like that stuff, but and it's a good opportunity for people to learn too. So.
Hearing all that, do we have a motion to appoint someone as a board liaison and then the alternate? Yeah, I mean,
You're the accountant.
I would be interested in the info, but I'm not serving as negotiations. So
Negotiations is me, and then are you the alternate?
No,
Or-
Leslie.
So does that mean, there's one date that I may not be able to make, but, I mean, I can do it. Unless you wanna-
is there, I mean, there's some sort of presentation to all of us with this info,
Right.
I'm guessing.
Couple.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beforehand.
so I think, I mean, I think it's, because it's, I mean, it almost sounds like it's sort of the lead up to negotiations. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, for sure. There's just a lot of good learning that I know for myself. I learned it and I heard it a couple times then, which was helpful for me. So can I have a motion then? So am I hearing we want to nominate
Casey?
Casey?
Yeah.
Yes, and then
Yeah.
Leslie as well.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to nominate Trustee Morrisroe as the board liaison to the Finance Subcommittee for 21-22 school year, unless we want to switch it.
Is there a second on that?
He's
I'll
looking at me
second.
weird.
And so I hear a second. So all in favor for that? Aye.
Aye.
Terrific.
It's just not what I thought I heard, but that's all right.
Did I not hear that? Okay.
I thought it was these two, but it's fine.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was,
Oh,
too. Oh, well.
I guess I was thinking if we're getting the info another place, then I'm not involved in negotiations.
And that's what I had heard
Yeah.
Heather say. Yes. If you, let's have a nomination.
I'll make a motion to
Motion,
appoint
thanks.
Leslie Bierke as the alternate board liaison to the Finance Subcommittee for the 21-22 school year.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe Leslie said there may be one you can't attend, and so if she hasn't, well, it might be good to have
Make
one of you guys come
accommodations
to
or-
the,
Everyone should be fine
to the
about
other.
it, you know.
Okay.
So we'll find a substitute for the alternate. Yeah.
The next thing we need to do is decide upon our schedule for our budget hearings and budget approval dates when the community can come, and we have those. And so before we look at that motion, is there any discussion then on which of those options work best for anyone's schedules or don't work as well? Is there a preference there? Dr. Hucker, is there a preference from admin at all on which of those dates? Or they're just all options and?
Didn't ask.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much has to be one of those three.
One of those three. Okay. Just was wondering if there was a preference to go earlier in the month or later in the month or.
I'd rather go earlier.
Go earlier?
Mhm.
Okay. So,
All
Trustee-
of these options meet the requirements.
Meet the requirements.
Of the law, so it's up to you, just what dates are more comfortable.
Terrific.
Earlier would also be my preference.
Okay. So options 1 or 2 of the earlier there, so, or the very earliest, which is the June 13th to June 20th. Trustee Morris, or does that work?
Works for me. I don't put the numbers together. I know for Shannon that'll be
I was
probably
just
a
thinking
crunch,
if we
right?
do
It
the
takes a week
13th
at a
and the
time.
27th, we're going to be in meetings almost every single Monday of the month. But if we do the earlier one, it condenses it better.
We typically don't do a workshop in June because there are so many things. Because there's graduations, there's. Right.
You will have the regular meeting the first Monday in June, and then you will have your budget hearing, your budget adoption, and 3 graduations, all in the month of June. So there will be no workshop
And the
typically in the month of
subcommittee
June.
meetings that, yeah.
And negotiations and whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah, so it gets real, there's a lot going on that we get to participate in, so. Am I hearing then that we prefer the option 1? Terrific. Can we have a motion then?
I make a motion to adopt option 1.
Actually, yeah, sorry, I should have said that. There's a motion for consideration there that we will want to read, so it all gets put in. So do you have that, or?
Oh, do you want me to read that? Is it the code that I'm reading?
It's actually right at the bottom there where it says motion for consideration. It's at the top of the page.
Oh, let's see.
Option 1 and the dates.
Move to approve option 1 to hold the public hearing on June 13th and adopt the budget on June 20th. Is that what that says? At the special meeting to take place prior to the regular meeting, to the regular July meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Terrific. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead then, and we are going to move into recommended resources for Boys and Girls Night Out. Good. Ms. Groutman, if you would like to present and introduce that for us, thank you.
Yes, thank you, trustees. Thank you, trustees, Dr. Hawker and Lynn, Miss Town. We're going to take a little bit of a turn right now from some of the numbers that we've been talking about, and I want to invite each of you, and I want to invite my colleagues back here and the audience, to think about yourself when you were 10 or 11 years old. Really think about yourself. Maybe you were studying the Revolutionary War. Maybe you started having friends because you started developing friends who had the same interests as you, and not because they were your parents and their parents were friends. Maybe you started listening to music that was different from what your parents listened to. Maybe you started getting zits. Maybe when you were done with PE, you started smelling a little bit. And maybe you're really hoping I stop right now because you're starting to feel a little uncomfortable and maybe a little embarrassed. Because maybe when you were that age, you were really confident, but maybe you were a little awkward sometimes, or maybe you were sometimes a little embarrassed. I don't know how you were at that age, but there are some things that we know for sure. We know that every year we will have a group of 10 and 11-year-olds who are coming through our system. We know that for sure. And we know that they are either going through or in the next few years will be going through some of the biggest changes their bodies will ever experience. We also know that the state of Idaho charges us with teaching them about these changes, called puberty. And we know that we, as their kinder, wiser, stronger adults, need to be prepared to guide them through this part of their lives. So we have some choices to make. So before I share some of those choices, let me share what our state of Idaho says that we need to teach our kids. It's pretty vague, but it says this: in grades 3 through 5, growth, development, and family life, that a healthy family is vital to the well-being and successful development of children and youth. Instruction needs to include the stages of life, changes that occur during puberty, and changes in relationships with others that accompany social development, healthy relationships, and information regarding growth and development. Information should be factual, medically accurate, and objective. So in looking at this, we took from this that we need to make sure that whatever we do to provide our kids an education, we need to make sure that it's factual, medically accurate, and objective. So in January, I came to you and told you I was going to put together a group with hopefully with your blessing, and I received that, to examine some materials. And when we did, I asked them to really look through them with the lens of, is it teaching these standards, which include more than just puberty, but about health and their well-being, in a way that's factual, medically accurate, and objective. And then I also added with them, I said, and let's add in developmentally appropriate, because we could read journal articles all day long and ask fifth graders to read that about things that are factual, medically accurate, and objective, but they probably might not get as much out of it as we would hope. So this is what I asked our group to consider. And here's what we know, that in the past we've had Boys and Girls Night Out with fifth graders. It's an opt-in activity, and often with parents or their guardian or their trusted adult. And in the past, what we've done is provided free resources that cost the district nothing. They came from Procter & Gamble, and the problem with providing a free resource is that we're at the mercy of whatever it is they decide to do with that resource. So when they decided to change it, and they did, we had to decide, are we going to continue with that resource? This hasn't been approved by our board now, and we elected to pull that and not use it. But that's one option, is to try and find these free resources that exist. But again, that puts us at the mercy of whatever is out there. The second option that we have is to do nothing. We don't have to provide a resource to our students that they can, and by do nothing, I don't mean don't teach them about puberty. That, please don't misunderstand. But we don't have to provide our students a resource that they can bring home with them. And that is an option that we have before us. And maybe that's an option that we want to choose. But I might suggest that in providing a resource, we are giving kids who are going through that very awkward, embarrassing stage of life, for many, not all, some are very confident, an opportunity to have language and resource that is vetted, that is trusted, that is approved by their community, to refer back to when they are having those times that that feels so embarrassing and so difficult that even as adults now, we don't want to think about it maybe, or don't want to, kind of gets a little bit embarrassing, and we start to flush a little, or something like that, perhaps. So those are some choices that we have before us, and our team reviewed 2 resources that had been narrowed down for us by school nurses. They looked at 2 primary resources, and I have them on the dais for each of you. And we have 6 copies of each resource at the district office ready for any public to review, should you decide that's the move that we want to make tonight. These were chosen for 2 reasons, or actually, 2 main reasons. One is they met by the school nurses that first criteria of being medically accurate, factual, and objective. And they also met a standard of being relatively lower cost in comparison to other resources that exist. In looking at these books, the committee was comprised of a pediatrician. It was comprised of nurses, of a social worker, parents in our community, an administrator, counselors. And they looked through this, and of the members of the committee, all but one approved it without reservations, approved both resources without reservations. The one person approved both books with a reservation, and the reservation was that she was hoping there would also be a resource for students who are neurodiverse and maybe need extra help in understanding this stage of human development. But that was the biggest reservation. In looking at these resources, what the committee said was that they were, they appreciated that they have sort of a comic book almost feel to them, that it's easy to read and well organized, but the information was stable. They also, or solid, excuse me. They also appreciated that both books were comprehensive and addressed well-being and health in terms of hygiene, as well as changes to the body. There were some concerns, such as for the boys, it addresses shaving, and that might not be something a 5th grader is experiencing yet. So there was that concern, but by and large, the committee was very in favor of providing these books to our students. There was some discussion about cost and the worthiness of cost, but many spoke to that this is an important resource for their life well-being, and would help them in the long term. I also just want us to acknowledge that, especially for the girls' book, if you go to Amazon, there are over 22,000 reviews on Amazon of this book. Of those 22,000 reviews, 1% give it a 1 star, 1% give it 4 stars, 3% give it 3 stars, 10% give it 4 stars, and 86% give it 5 stars. So it's not without some critique, but by and large, it seems to be a book that many people have found to be helpful in talking with their students or their children about puberty and the changes that they're going through during this time in their lives. So just to review our roadmap really quickly, in February 2nd, we had an organizational meeting with the committee. on February 23rd. They read these books during the first and second meeting on February 23rd. We had a second meeting where we discussed our impressions, our thoughts, and then they were given a Google form to fill out for a final vote about whether they recommended this as a resource or not, and any final comments. And again, those were the results that I've shared with you and that are in your board packet. Today, I'm bringing these books before you as a recommendation. If you so decide, we can put these out to the community for review until the next board meeting and gather comments. And then at the April board meeting, you could choose to take action on whether or not we should adopt these or not. And then if that were to happen, we would order these books for fifth graders, which they could receive on an opt-in basis. Possible future work by the committee is also, we really have a need to review those videos that we're using. They were adopted in 2009, I think. And some of the students and counselors and parents have commented that it shows. And so they were hoping for maybe a more up-to-date video, so that can be a focus of future work. And with that, I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? The last.
Mine's kind of a comment more than a question, but I know one of the questions I asked today through the board packet was the cost, and this would be a reoccurring cost. And then I think your answer was we don't have a budget necessarily for health resources. So the cost is a concern for me because they are pretty expensive. They look pretty nice. I personally would like to have some time for myself to be able to spend with them. I think putting it out for community input would be really great to get more input from parents who have children perhaps in those age. And then when you say opt-in, is that a form that goes home with the children? Okay.
It is, yes.
Okay. So that would be my option for me to maybe put it out for community and then come back to this at, I guess, next,
Maybe the next board meeting, because they either way,
yeah,
they will go out. And when they opt in as well, parents would receive this right sitting with their kids, kind of, or how would that work?
This year, some of the schools have already held their boys or girls night out, and so this year it would run a little bit differently than it would in future years. If we were to do this, the parents would be sitting, like you said, right next to them, or their guardians or adults. But this year it would be opt-in, and they would likely just receive it and it would go home with the kids in their backpacks, and parents would know to expect it.
Are these books purchased through Amazon? Where do you purchase these books?
You can purchase them through Amazon. You can purchase them directly from the publisher is American Girl. They are the same folks who do American Girl dolls. You'll notice none of that branding is on the boys' book.
No, well, they would not want them.
Yes.
I was wondering if you have any options for buying in bulk, if there's any kind of discounts available to get them. I mean, because this will be a pricey undertaking.
Yeah, yes. We can definitely look into that. We can also discuss this with Follett publishers, for example. They can sometimes get books in bulk for cheaper than what we can provide. So the estimate that I gave you is an estimate, and that's something that we would need to then budget for in the curriculum budget in future years.
So Katie, this could be a one-time, this kind of year thing, and could it be the kind of thing where we tell parents, and I know we have policy on this, but say this costs the district, would anyone like to donate towards this? I mean, I know that there's that policy language as well. I mean, because some families might already have the resource. I already had the resource on my library, my kids' library, and so, I wouldn't need it, and so.
Yeah, and in that case, you could opt out, and we could use the resource that we were going to give your student to someone next year. So there are definite options there. I would have to look into policy, like you said, about. But I think it would be I'm not aware of a policy that forbids us from asking for a donation.
And could you reiterate for us maybe why provide an actual physical resource versus just here's a list of resources parents purchase if you so choose?
I think, as we think about I was talking to a school nurse and I asked her that question and I said, what's the value really of giving a child this book? And she said, with Boys and Girls Night Out, it's you get so much information so fast that you're not necessarily always able to absorb something. And with Boys Night Out, oftentimes it's kind of crickets after the video presentation. There aren't a lot of questions that people want to ask in front of others. And so we know that children have access to the internet where there's a lot of information, and some of it is really good and some of it is really not. And this gives our students, our children, an opportunity to access solid information that we know is medically accurate and truthful and helps frame their development in a positive light. Both books talk about that people develop at different times, and all of that is normal. And if you're worried, you need to talk to your trusted adults and you need to talk to your doctor and get their feedback. And, and it encourages them and gives them language like, well, Mom, I was reading about this thing. What do you think about this thing? And so it gives kids language and opportunity to share what they're thinking and feeling. Some parents I've talked to who have these books have opted to read a chapter a night with their child, and they said it was really awkward, but it gave them an opportunity to talk and share some of these things that they might not have had otherwise. And we also know that not every child always has access to an adult in their lives that they might feel as confident in talking to about these things. So it sort of gives every child an opportunity to understand what's happening to their bodies and things that they might have questions about.
Questions? Trustee Morris-Rowe, Trustee Inner.
I think for me, it's kind of twofold, I guess, on this one. I worry about the cost. So I'll maybe come back to that. I think the second part for me, and the big question I had, and you mentioned looking at the videos, but I think some uniformity of the content, the delivery, the when, the how. I know in years past, some schools have done it during the day without parents, and some have been in the evening with parents and those sorts of things. And to me, this is us partnering with parents and guardians as kind of an icebreaker for a tough conversation that most parents are avoiding, right? Starting at least. And it kind of jumps it off. So that's how I see this program, I guess, as a starting point and a start of a conversation that continues, hopefully, in the home and with the parents being the guiding force on that. So I guess that's maybe what I thought we were going to see, or my hope was going to be more of that we're standardizing the what, the when, and the how. As far as that 2-hour window or whatever it is that we're doing these events. So I think that is important, and I think that needs to be addressed at some point. In the spirit of partnering with parents, to me, this is it's a recommended resource, and we recommend, and whether we have them there and we're selling them, or we bought them at a bulk rate and you can now buy it for $10, or you can go online and buy it for $12 if you want it. We have so many needs in our district and so many unfulfilled wishes within our district that I'm not sure $50,000 a year for these books is that what I saw?
No,
10,000.
10,000.
Excuse me, 10,000 a year is there for me, because this is a primarily a parent guardian responsibility, I think, and we're partnering with them to start that conversation and to provide a good trusted resource, if you will, recommendation. That's, and I could probably be convinced. I'd love to see a partner, a sponsor, maybe, that, you know, someone in the health community or whatever that kind of took that on. But I think that's allocating $10,000 for purchasing these books. I would have a tough time justifying that. So. But I like the book. I know we had it. I asked my wife. We have it in our library. And I think this is the book that a lot of the schools have used, or several of the schools have recommended, I think, over the years, as a resource. So I think it's important we put it out for comment and decide how we use it.
So, I mean, we're kind of talking about two things here, right? One is, are we adopting this as a curricular resource? The other one is, are we providing a copy? I mean, is this two separate things?
It could be. It could be. It could be one, do we recommend that we have one per student in the classroom that we somehow think about using, but that would open up some other issues as well. And then the second is, would we provide this for students to use as a consumable and take home?
Okay.
So maybe at this point, it's a matter of these resources go out for 30 days. They come back to us. We continue to look at, is there other even funding options, folks that want to step up and help provide it. I agree with Trustee Borster. There's a lot of needs, and $10,000 could be spent 10,000 ways right now. We all know that. I also appreciate, though, what you shared just about providing it, because it does open up the doors at home to be able to go through that, and making sure that kids have access to that. So is that kind of what we're hearing? And then it'll come back anyways to us next month for adoption. Is there any other questions off that? I mean,
would it be possible at next month? Well, I guess, would it be beneficial to us? I'm not going to ask Katie to do something if we're not asking, but to maybe get an idea of that kind of content piece. I'm not saying what you're presenting, but maybe a timeline of, okay, next year or whatever, we're going to reconvene this committee and we're going to update the videos that are shown, and we're going to cover these topics, body changes and, whatever it is. But to me, I think that's what people are, that's the concern, right? What are we talking about? And do they not want to come to this? Or are we talking about something they don't think is age appropriate or developmentally appropriate?
It's almost looking at what the content curriculum would look like almost for next year, because this year some schools have done their stuff already. So we're really looking future here, right? I mean, what's next year as we start the year? What does Girls' Night Out across the district really look like for 271? So
and can I clarify that the will of the board is that it be? Are you asking that it be standardized? Because we know that there are some schools that have certain traditions or things that are special to them that they hold dear, and so I'm just wanting clarification that you would prefer that this be standardized.
Could you give me an example there?
Well, for example, some schools, like you said, prefer to hold it at night and have, I've heard of having special pancakes or special shaped cupcakes, et cetera, and some schools prefer to do it during the day because they don't have to bus kids in, and they don't have to necessarily, like, their parents who might not be able to attend at night can have their children opt into this information and not necessarily worry about being able to provide transportation there. And given that we are charged by the state of Idaho to provide this education opportunity,
that could be challenging. So I guess I just want to make sure that I'm hearing clearly that you would prefer that this be standardized.
I guess my response back to that would be some of that sounds a little back to curriculum stuff that we've learned before, the tight loose kind of model. You know, if it works better to do it in the evening for the different schools, I'm okay with that. But there is that list of at least
That's
for me,
what I thought
would
you
be
were
the
focusing on
content
content.
pieces. These are the 5 bullet points that we hit during this time, whether that's during the day or at night. You know, there's different spaces that different schools have to do that to make it work for their community. So whether that's during the day or at evening, each school is a little different that way. But what are the content? These are the things that we believe District 271 is going to teach during those.
So the
those
content
times.
standardized, but not necessarily the delivery.
Right.
Okay.
That would be me.
That's probably not me, but to me, if it's opt-in and it's during the school day, there's just another added layer of awkwardness to it. But that's me. I don't know. And I don't know. Right.
I've done it both ways now, during the day with my girls and in the evening with one of my daughters. And I didn't notice that awkwardness between the kids. It was more amongst the adults at the daytime one. So.
I hear what you're saying, and for different school communities, it's going to work different, whether it's daytime and evening. So I think having some flexibility there is probably not a bad idea. It gives me some pause on an opt-in, because how are we monitoring that? Where if it's after hours, if it's opt-in, they've opted in because they've shown up, right? They've transported themselves there. And so that's more my concern maybe on the during the school day part. And then there may be some funding, you may run into more fee type issues like, okay, this is during the school and this is part of their coursework. Maybe you do have to provide a resource at that point, right? It's kind of that optional fee thing. If it's part of accredited class, you have to provide it fee free, right? If it's outside of a class, you don't. But
Would this fall under kind of that same category, kind of as donations for field trips and that kind of stuff, where it's an optional donation and parents
Right.
can do scholarships for
Right.
others?
yeah, you'd have to treat it that way, I think.
Katie, does that give you enough to go with at this point?
Okay, so let me just summarize.
Yeah.
We're going to put it out for these resources out for 30 days and come back in April with comments from the community. And at that point, you'll make a decision, perhaps. And then you would like to see in April as well a timeline for reconvening the committee and providing the information about the pieces that would be standardized, and those will be directly related to content, not necessarily delivery.
And yes, and then possibly maybe some other funding ideas, because like it's been mentioned, we have so many things. To incur this cost every year is a lot.
Okay.
So maybe some alternate ideas for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And our community can come to the district office, correct? To
Yes.
preview and look at these resources.
So, in anticipation that this might be the outcome tonight, our office personnel have a sign-in board, and we will just ask that you, because we can't afford to provide every single person in our community their own personal copy, we have 6 copies available. If the Sunshine Room or the main meeting room is open, we'll certainly invite people to be able to, at their leisure, read there. Otherwise, it might have to happen in the lobby. But we are certainly welcoming all community members in to preview these resources and provide their comments and opinions.
Perfect. Thank you to the committee as well. That's a great committee that you were able to put together a lot of just key folks for our district, and so very thankful for your work and for the work of that committee.
Thank you. I'm very thankful for them as well. It's hard to find people who enjoy talking about puberty. So.
Thank you for the puberty conversation. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you so much. We have 3 policies that will be out this month for information, or not even out for information. These are out for information this month. These are the 3. Yep. One will be the enrollment qualifications, one will be extracurricular activities, and one will be student fees. Is there any comments or anything that Ms. Town would need from any of us at this moment regarding these 3 policies? Hearing none.
No, these appeared to be fairly straightforward, minor little edits.
Yeah, edits, and all are redlined and on the web as well, if folks would like to take a look. So, terrific. Almost done here. So, want to point out that we, on March 21st, have a workshop, and it's on IBB and negotiations, so interest-based bargaining, and it is here at 4 o'clock on March 21st, and that is a workshop. We will not have public comment at that, but we will be able to discuss everything else, and it will be live streamed. So, yeah. April 4th, then, we have our next regular board meeting. April 18th, workshop topics. For that will be the bond capacity, your budget, career ladder, and high school schedule alignment as well. So that will be a long...
How long is that meeting?
We're going to move it along. Yep, okay. That will be a workshop. Our workshops are being scheduled for 2 hours, and so we will
At a new time, right?
at 4 o'clock. Yep. And then May 2nd will be our next regular board meeting. And then we have on the calendar May 16th for our next workshop as well. So, unless there's anything else.
The 4 o'clock starts on the 21st. It's starting this month. We're doing that. Okay.
Yes. Yep. So, all right. Thank you all, and meeting adjourned.